Fellas, I had no idea people ate dog in Zambia. Did you know that? That's crazy, yeah? That's crazy. I mean, this is insane. Okay, let's watch this. We're going to talk about many countries and do not miss the subject about Zambia and dogs. Okay, let's go. So we're first going to start in West Africa. We're talking about Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. Here's a country, Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. These are three countries that have been fighting very hard for their independence. Now, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger have come together accusing Ukraine in the United Nations, saying Ukraine needs to respect them. This comes after the Ukrainians supported a terrorist group, as per the Malians, in that region to unalive Russian soldiers and Malians. So basically what happened was the Russian soldiers were supporting the Malians to go and fight against terrorists on that side. And unfortunately, the Ukrainians supported those terrorists to unalive the Russians by providing them with intelligence, weaponry, and ability to be ready to do that. Many Russians were unalive. 84 Russians were unalive during the action and 37 Malians. So the Malians got very upset about that. I mean, you can understand if a foreign nation come into your country to come and fight their enemy in your backyard, destroying windows and doors and injuring the kids, you are not going to like that. I mean, it's okay for you two, Russia and Ukraine, to fight wherever you want. You can fight in Russia or you can fight in Ukraine. Don't bring your fight in my house, in Mali. That's unacceptable. So this happens when the Russians and the Malians were doing patrol in that specific area of Mali, looking for terrorists, where they were subjected to one of the most vicious attacks from the terrorists. And for people who've seen the pictures, you've seen pictures of white men in that area. And trust me, in that side of Africa, there is no white man. Now, how do the Malians know that it's Ukraine? Because the remark was confirmed by Yuri Puryavaskrov, Ukraine's ambassador to Senegal. So the Ukrainian ambassador to Senegal was bragging, saying, well, we've just helped people in northern Mali to unalive Malians and Russians. They were actually boasting for unaliving Russians. But in the same token, they did damage to the Malians. So Malians were not happy at all. Immediately, Mali severed all relationship with Ukraine.
In the name of our highest authorities, I have the great honor of reading communique number 068 from the transitional government, the contents of which follow. The transitional government of the Republic of Mali has learned with profound shock of the subversive statements by Mr. Andriy Yusov, spokesperson for the Ukrainian Military Intelligence Agency, in which he admitted Ukraine's involvement in a cowardly, treacherous, and barbaric attack by terrorist armed groups that resulted in the deaths of Malian defense and security forces in Tinzaouattan, as well as material damage. These statements were reinforced by Mr. Yuri Pivovarov, Ukraine's ambassador to Senegal, who openly and unequivocally expressed his country's support for international terrorism against Mali.
2 days later, Niger followed through by cutting all relationship with Ukraine.
Niger became the second African country in a week to cut diplomatic ties with Ukraine amid an escalating row over Ukraine's support for al-Qaeda-affiliated terrorists behind an attack last month that killed scores of Malian soldiers. Niger's government announced that it would follow its neighbor Mali by severing relations with Ukraine with immediate effect, accusing Kiev of supporting terrorist groups.
But how did the Africans know that it's Ukraine that was involved? Because there was another agent of intelligence of Ukraine that clearly said on screen, we did that. We coordinated the attack.
The fact that the rebels received the necessary information that allowed them to conduct a successful operation against Russian war criminals, the whole world has already seen this. In principle, this can be commented on. We certainly will not disclose any details, but let's say there will be a continuation. This is sensitive information. Therefore, everything that Ukraine does is happening within the limits and within the framework of international law, taking into account all the necessary procedures.
Many people believe this was perhaps because he was super excited to unalive Russians, that he couldn't contain his emotions, not understanding that by saying that, he's also compromising his relationship with these African countries. Now, many Africans were very upset, but they didn't feel like it was enough. Like Nigeria was very pissed off at other Africans, saying, why don't other Africans get angry at the fact that a Ukrainian army or a European army can come into Africa land and unalive Africans? Why don't you send a message, a strong message, like Europeans did with Russia? Remember when Russia crossed into Ukraine? All Europeans were unanimous. No to Russia. Stop the invasion. Don't do that anymore. Why couldn't Africans do that towards Ukraine? Nigerians were saying. The African Union didn't say much, to the surprise of everybody. Not to the surprise because they're useless anyway. When they took out Gaddafi, they didn't say a thing. Yes, France, America, NATO, wherever you want to call them, they went into Libya, unaliving Gaddafi. And these African leaders said nothing. Absolutely nothing. Now you dare go do that in Europe. Go attack even Romania and see if Europeans are going to watch you. In a joint letter, the three countries' foreign ministers say their governments were shocked by the comments of Andrei Yusov, a spokesperson for Ukrainian military intelligence, admitting Ukraine's role in the cowardly, barbaric, and criminal attack between July 24th and 26th. The letter called the Security Council to take appropriate measures against these subversive actions which strengthen terrorist groups in Africa. So in other words, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger are accusing Ukraine of strengthening terrorists in Africa. And the United Nations need to do something about it. Do you think the United Nations is going to do something about that? I mean, let's face it, Ukraine right now is the baby of the United Nations. Everybody's fighting for Ukraine. Everybody's contributing for Ukraine. Do you think right now the United Nations is ready to do anything negative toward Ukraine? That's a good question and I want you to answer that. They say these acts constitute a violation of sovereignty and territorial integrity of our state, a clear aggression and support of international terrorism in flagrant violation of the Charter of the United Nations and the relevant international convention. The Charter of the United Nations is violated every single time by the West. They don't do anything about it. In many things, I'm not going to give you examples here, okay? But when it's done by somebody else, then they're going to bring you all these lawyers and stuff. They're going to call you terrorist. They're going to sanction and stuff like that. Now, are we living in a fair world? Can the Malian, the Nigerian, and Burkinabe stand together and say, listen, you need to call up Ukraine on what they just did in our land? They've severed relationship, but you guys need to do something about it, because it is unacceptable. Now, my other question is this. If the Russian happened to be in China, do you think Ukrainians in China would have attacked the Russians and unalived them? Probably not. Why? Because they don't want to anger the Chinese. Why don't they want to anger the Chinese? China is a very powerful country with tremendous amount of military force. Ukrainians don't want to anger them. And the Russian being next to India or Turkey, do you think Ukrainian would have attacked the Russians in Turkey or India? Probably not, because these are very strong, powerful military in the world. So if they can do that in Africa, why do you think they did it in Africa? Because they don't care about you. I mean, what are you going to do? You're just some poor Africans, untrained. I'm just saying. So these three countries have come together to go and lay a complaint. Again, fellas, let me put it this way for you. Being brothers is not necessarily because we just have the same color. I'm sorry. I know this is disappointing, but I have to remind you. Brotherhood is proven. You need to be my brother through actions. You need to fight my fight with me. That's brotherhood. You need to be there when I'm angry, when I'm suffering, when I'm crying, when I'm in pain. That's brotherhood. Brotherhood is not, oh, he looks like me. I mean, there are three countries in Africa, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, that are really brothers because they've come up with a pact. They've become one nation or one federation, saying if you attack one of them, it's like you've attacked all of them. So if one of them is attacked, they will react like a little NATO, while the other African nations are just looking like stupid leaders, doing absolutely nothing, stealing money from the government, getting people down the street, claiming taxes and absolute nonsense like that. Another thing these countries have in common is they are led by soldiers. So these countries are all subjected to coup d'etat. They kicked out their presidents because those presidents, civilian presidents, seem to be working for Western interests, meaning they allowed companies from Western countries to come and take, sometimes for free, sometimes with very little benefit, provided they benefiting they and their families. So these soldiers that were part of the government came and they overthrew them. They said, we're going to lead our countries. Guess what? Other African countries don't like that. They hate it. Other leaders of Africa, they hate these soldiers. They say they're undemocratical. They should not be in power. Why? Because these people, in fact, want good for Africans, not for their pockets and their families. Now, these three countries came out of ECOWAS. You remember ECOWAS is this group of countries. You can see the map. These are ECOWAS. They're all trying to work together as Western African nations. But the three countries, Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, say they're not going to be part of the ECOWAS anymore. ECOWAS have tried very hard to try to bring them again. Say, hey, brothers, please join us again. They say, no. Hell no, we're not interested. Do you think these three countries should join ECOWAS again or not? Let me know.